Okay, I think we're going to get started because there's a lot to do in 1 hour, and of course, this is a lunch and learn. I want to make sure. So I'll start by saying thank you to everybody who is attending right now. Reimagining our churches lunch and learn. This is the first time we've ever done this, Monty and I will introduce Monty in a minute. But Monty and I have actually do a lot of work together, and we work on churches, renovating and helping people renovate churches in our side, which a little bit. So anyway, I really wanted, in the wake of the Catholic Church closing 78 churches in Western New York, we're getting our phones here at President. Our phones are ringing off the hook. Our emails are crazy. People don't know what to do, and so we really wanted to have a webinar that like inspires people, educates people, thinks outside the box. Any resources we can give to you all that are out there that are trying to save a church or want to save a church, or maybe you're church goer. To give you as many resources as we can. So today we're doing a Reimagining Our Churches talk. It's presented by and Monte Anderson. Oh, hold on one second. There we go. There's me, the executive director of Preservation Buffalo Niagara, me with my hard hat at the Richardson Center, of course. A lot of people know me here in Buffalo on this call today. But if you don't know, I actually come from the world of renovation. I've spent 16 years in property management, construction, had my own construction company called Little Will Restoration Company. I do property management for my whole adult life. I've been in property management. I was on the zoning board for 9 years, so a ton of zoning. And I'm going to talk a little bit about zoning today. Monty and I met actually. Monty is the founder of the Incremental Development Alliance, which is a nonprofit that educates on small development around the country. Monty and I met because we both trained. I was a trainer there, and he was the founder. As I met here at Preservation Buffalo Niagara, and then Monty and I actually have a we have a consulting company that we've had for a couple of years now called Neighborhood Evolution, which is the one thing when I accepted the job at Preservation Buffalo Niagara, I said I wouldn't get rid of because I love it so much. And so Monty and I, actually, I'll do a little introduction to Monty. And Monty, you can fill in if you'd like, but Monty to me, Monty and I have worked together for many, many years. And he is legendary small scale developer. And small, big, I'd say small to medium size as well, as you'll see. But Monty cares about community. He cares about people. When there is a homeless, like unhoused situation in his community in Dallas, he doesn't fight it. He basically says, what do you need? And so he's set up showers for them. He's worked with churches. That's what we're going to talk about today, and trying to reimagine the church space so the church can pay the bills that they need, right? So Monty is like super out of the box thinking. We work together as peers, but and Monty, I'll say it, but I always look up to Monty, and I'm like year 16 in my career. Monty is year 36, so he just has so much work that he has done. Monty is very active in the urban community, the Congress for New Urbanist. He's been written about in like a ton of books, including Suburban Retrofit by Ellen Dunham Jones. And actually, Monty and I were both written about in this book from Strong Towns that's out about solving the housing crisis in America. And so anyway, I don't know, Monty, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, just good to be here with you, Bernice, today. I don't have the great architecture that you guys have up in Buffalo, New York, and that area up there. We don't have that good of stuff. But I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I've basically committed myself to my neighborhoods for my whole career. And that's where I work, except for teaching and consulting with Bernice. We teach all over the country, but both Bernice and I are doers who teach. So we're active right now in the remodeling and redeveloping and reinventing of not just churches, but old shopping centers and other old buildings. And so we're actually doing the work. So when you're getting information from us, you're getting it hot off the press. It's not like you're getting, some teachers who've never done the work. So that's the difference between us and others. But glad to be here with all of you today. I'm excited these churches in Buffalo are so, and in New York are so amazing to me, and I'm excited to talk about them.
And I will say one thing, Monty has been to Buffalo a couple times, but the last time he was here in December of last year with me. So he's been here in a couple of different seasons. And, when I asked him if he would do this talk, it comes from from love for the churches, love for the community, and frankly, just wanting to help Buffalo out, to inspire. So, which leads me to what we're going to talk about today. So our historic churches are absolutely worth fighting for. And we know that, right? We all know this. There's several people right now on this webinar, and thank you so much for being here. But there are thousands of people in Western New York that are facing the situation that we're in, which is that our historic church, the population tends to be declining for the most part. We have these incredible buildings that were built by hand by our neighbors and by our great grandfathers and grandfathers by hand. And now they're facing the need for repair. They're facing the need for redevelopment, for closure from the Catholic Diocese, closure of other, it's not just the Catholic Diocese, but right now we're facing this big crisis with them. But we have all these churches all around our communities. And the real question is like, what do we do with them? How do we set them up for a successful future? And sometimes that includes keeping the people in place so they can practice their worship in the building, and maybe getting creative with the spaces to pay the bills. And then other times it's been completely vacated. What do we do, right? How do we protect it? How do we get it on the National Register? How do we get funds for it, et cetera? So we're going to kind of cover the basics today. This is like Monty has a lifetime. I mean, we can't cover that in 1 hour, but we're going to cover some ideas. Our goal is to inspire. It's to give you some ideas. It's to show you some success stories. So Monty is about to jump into success stories, things that have actually worked with churches. And then I'm going to cover at the end some things about zoning, which you want to hear, even though zoning may be boring to some people. Zoning in Buffalo is important, how it actually positively impacts our churches. I'm going to talk a little bit of where to find for your church if you want to redevelop it, and a few other things. So, but to kick it off, they're worth fighting for. Now, before Monty speaks, I want to kind of set up a little bit. Monty and I have this phrase that I say this all the time, which is do what you can with what you have where you are. And this is by Teddy Roosevelt. And it's a phrase that I have spent my life leaning into, which is, and we're going to talk about this as it reflects to churches, because we have these big buildings, but they have all these great little spaces in there. And, everybody gets overwhelmed by the big building, right? A huge church, the big roof. How do we do this? But if we can break it up piece by piece and do what you can with what you have where you are, right? Piece by piece, sudden, maybe you have half the church that's occupied with cool spaces and the other half is vacant, and work your way 3/4 of the way, it starts to become full. And now all of a sudden it starts to really get amped up. And it's really about incrementally taking, the goal where you want to be and starting on the bottom and working your way up, doing what you can with what you have where you are. And it's a phrase that I often just quote all the time. Not usually about churches though. Sometimes Monty's heard this a bunch, but I usually talk about tulips. If you want 1,000 tulips, you can only plant 25 because you can only afford 25 tulips. You do it for 10 years and now all of a sudden you've got hundreds and more. So, but we're going to apply that theory to churches today. So Monty, I have 2 slides and then I'm going to cue you up and then I'll let you go. So I'll let you do your thing. So what I've been seeing as I've walked through, I've walked through several, dozens of churches at this time since the Catholic Church announced. And Monty and I've worked also with other churches around the country. And what we always see, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody. It's not meant to offend anybody. But what we find is that churches often care about the sanctuary. They have, obviously this beautiful sanctuary space where people come, they gather, they pray, they do their thing. And then they have all of these other spaces that are typically vacant Or as I say, they have Christmas trees in them. This actually, I never took a picture of a room with Christmas trees in it, but I've seen it over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And so what I have said to so many churches especially in the last few months is you see these spaces where you have Christmas trees and you have storage, or you have them vacant. In this case, this is a picture at one of my favorite churches at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. They have these just vacant spaces. And so Monty and I are going to talk about today, how can you use those spaces to bring in money? How can they give, everybody's facing this insurance, high insurances, high operating costs. They can't afford a pastor. They can't afford an assistant. Well, we're going to show you how you can break up space and use space to afford these things. So cue it up. It's use what you have. Don't sit on these spaces that are there vacant, when these could easily be spaces for your church. They could be spaces that you rent. They could, offices, nonprofits. I think we sit in the Market Arcade, but I've got to be honest with y'all, I think we'd love to be in a historic church. So there's plenty of nonprofits and people that maybe want to rent these spaces from you. And so many people think, this is just storage. But really, when Monty and I look at these churches, we see these as opportunities for money for you, for your church. So I just wanted to say that out loud. And I want to show you a few examples of spaces that I've seen where it's unbelievable, actually, that they could easily be spaces to rent, to use, etc. And they just sit there sort of, I don't want to say they're collecting dust, but they're not being used as best as they can be. So here's a few examples of just that would be great. I mean, look at that tin ceiling in the middle, just sitting there, not being used, not being rented. And so what we're going to talk about, what Monty's going to talk about just in a second, is using these spaces a little bit better, running the numbers on them. The picture on the right-hand side, the school, that's St. Bernard's here, and one of the schools one of the churches that are closing. They have a school that's been sitting vacant for probably about 8 to 10 years, I believe. And I looked and I go, oh, this would be a great artist studio. This would be a great office. Like, you could just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
They're still in there. It's unbelievable. And so there's so many spaces that these churches just have that are just beautiful, and and can be renovated and brought back to life.
Yeah.
So Monty, now is your chance. So much for being here,
and they're ready to go too. They're really divided up quite nicely, where you don't have to do in a lot of cases, you don't have to do much work. And we'll look at that in a minute, but we're going to start here with the Methodist Church in Duncanville, Texas next. So this was a church on Main Street, not a very good one, not anything like you've got up there, Bernice, with all your great form and architecture and stuff. But this was a Methodist church, and you can see the sanctuary on one end, and you can see where they've added on to it the white part in the middle, and then they added a fellowship room on the other end over the years. And then it got to the point where the church just wasn't doing any good. And it's like, the pastor came to me one day and he said, Monty, will you buy this church? And I was doing other work around it. And I said, yeah, I'll buy it. But the first thing we thought about was, how do we divide it up into other spaces? Go to the next slide. And so this is what it looked like. You can see it doesn't have much street appeal as far as storefronts to divide up into like little retail spaces, but it has an excellent corner. It's at the corner of Main and Center, right in the middle of Duncanville, a town of about 50,000 people, just south of Dallas. Next. And this is what the floor plan looked like. And what we did was we took the church space, number 134, that's church today, but we turned that into a dance studio. And then we divided up the other spaces. You can see we just cut lines down the middle and put storefronts in on 126, 118, 110, 108, 106, 104, all the way down to 100, and divided it up into small spaces. Next. So over the years, the sanctuary space, we started out as a dance studio. The donuts and the other little spaces, the barbershops and the other little spaces, they all did fairly well. The tenants came and went, but you can see how those storefronts, we cut those into the brick walls that were there and created those new suites. But the sanctuary space kept going, in and out of business. We had a dance school there for a while. Then we had a lighting studio. Then we had a couple of other nonprofits, and it just never worked very good. Next. So over the years, we began to cut it up even more. So in this section here, I want to show you this section of the fellowship hall. This in the beginning, it had no storefronts, as you see there. Go to the next slide. So this is the part of the building that's red that you see, and it was 2,600 square feet, and it was rented all to one tenant when we first purchased it, was as an office. Next. And in that space, this is what it looked like. If you see that 2,600 square feet, this is just one section of the building. Remember how Bernice was talking about doing what you can with what you got really quick. And so in the beginning, we had on the sanctuary end, we had the dance school. And then on the other end, we had this office space, corporate office space. And then in between, we had a couple of 3 little spaces. But note here where the restroom is in the top left-hand corner. And then note the white, go back. No, not yet. Go back. Yeah.
Got it.
So this was an office, typical office, a couple of doors going in, and it was getting $2,200 a month, or about $26,000 a year. But there's not similar to Buffalo, probably in Duncanville, there's not a lot of office tenants anymore because, how big is your office? Your office is this big now, right? So you just don't need a big amount of office. So next slide. So what we did, notice the restroom in the top. See, it's still in the place where it was at. And do you notice the white walls and the dark walls? So we reused a lot of the walls. And then we added storefronts in across the front. See down where it says 104, 108, and 100. So we divided it up into these small little occupants. And so we divided it into 5 spaces, which the income went from $2,600 a month to $5,590 per month, which is $67,000 a year. A rental increase from where we were to where we are of about $40,000 at an 8% cap rate, which is a way we value income producing properties, an 8% cap rate we use on this. That added $500,000 in value to the building in 2,600 square foot space. So just by dividing these things up into small bites, then we could do this. And now look at the other beauty of this. Do you see those rate amounts, the rental rates? The Suite 108's got $1,240 a month. Suite 106, $1,185, 104 is $940. See, these became low enough prices where small little retail or service type businesses could afford to be on Main Street. Here's these small little spaces right up on Main Street. They were very affordable, but they were very high per square foot and rate. And that's how we got the value to increase. Next.
And can I chime in for 1 second? Because so I know people are saying, oh, we're not going to break into a church and break into the bricks. But in Buffalo, that same layout exists all in our outbuildings, our exterior buildings. That's like when I was at Our Lady of Perpetual Help, it exists. Canty, it exists. Like these churches have that same space, it just looks a little different here. So I just want to make sure I say that, out loud. But, it's a concept that we want to get across. Right. Go ahead.
Yes. And we'll see one in just a minute. We'll see another one. But then we figured out we struggled with this building forever. And then one day a church came along, and it's like God sent this church back to me. And it's like God said, put a church back in this church space. So we put a church back in the sanctuary to go along with the donuts and the barbershop and the dog grooming and those other things. And this has been the key to making this work. It was just like so right. It's been stable since then. And now we're in the process of upgrading the building into, I would call this 103. We started off with 101. We went to 102 when we divided those little spaces up, and now we're 103. We're redoing the whole building. Next. As you'll see, this is the sanctuary built back in 1947. For us, that's historic. Here's some more landscaping improvements and paint. Most of this is just landscaping and paint. Put a little gravel in and some bike racks and a little, we put a little more graphic design on the signage and stuff. As you can see, it's evolved and going to look a lot better. And this is actually happening in real time right now. I've owned this building for like 20 years, so this has been a long time coming. But it was just amazing to me how I figured out how the church belonged back in these spaces, and that it could be even two churches using that space. Here's some stuff on the back. That's the donut shop. So we, put some murals. We like murals and paint, in these buildings and stuff, and it makes them colorful and relevant. Here's a big blank wall, and it just makes them great. Now, this is one First Presbyterian Church in Lafayette, Louisiana, that Bernice and I have worked on together. And next. And so this space, we met with about 3 very elderly women. And these 3 women were one of about 40 members part of this congregation. And they were like, we heard you guys were working in town. What can we do to save our church? Our membership is old. It's not gathering any young people. And so this is the flyer that Bernice created for them with what I'm going to show you we did with their spaces. And now this one is all interior, more like your churches that you described in Buffalo. But look at this. This is affordable office spaces or studios. And so it's got internet and coffee and meeting spaces and studios. You've still got a sanctuary or event spaces. And these are all new things happening where it can be used 7 days a week. It's a resource that God gave us, I believe, and he wanted us to use it in more than just 1 day a week. And the rates start at like $650 a month. So here's the spaces. The pink is the sanctuary. It's a beautiful sanctuary with a great organ. The orange was a fellowship room where they had all their big dinners and things. And then you got the conference room was light blue. The church office is dark blue. And then we have these rental spaces down the wing that are full of Christmas trees and all of that stuff that Bernice was talking about. And we had to start, you have to start with this. You have to start with an as-built floor plan. And that's what this is. And with this as-built floor plan, next, this is the second floor. So you got the first floor and we got the second floor. See, all the infrastructure, the halls are there. And with this floor plan, now we can start to take this apart and look at what we can do with the sanctuary. Like the Unitarian Church wanted to rent this sanctuary for $1,500 a month at a different time that the Presbyterian Church was renting it. We have lots of events that want to rent this space, and we figured we could rent this at $2,000 per time, about 24 times per year. And the fellowship hall would become another event or could become another church space at different times. And then all the studios are simple. You see, we didn't change anything. All we did was paint it up and fix it up, clean up the restrooms, and all of these spaces can be leased. See things for as little as $575 a month, $900 a month, $750.
Right.
That's all bills included, all bills including internet in those spaces. So next, you see this is the second floor. And there's no new elevators, no new restroom remodels. We just cleaned everything up. Now this one's in pretty good shape, I have to say. This one's, it's got popcorn, stucco. On the ceilings, it needs to be a lot of paint and flooring and things that need to be done. And so next, so this is a performer, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but this was done very early. We laid out the income of each of those spaces very early. As soon as we got an as-built floor plan, Bernice and I got together here and we worked out with the locals what you could get for each of these spaces, how many times a year you could lease the sanctuary, how many other church could we share this with, and then we came up with a total net operating income on this property. And that net operating income means the gross income minus all the expenses. And we were projecting about $136,000 a year. And with what you see, with those as-builts and that flyer and this very simple pro forma and a little bit more, we had a little bit more. We didn't want to go into that today. They were able to go to the Presbyterian conference and get a loan, and they got their loan. And now you got these 3 elderly women are now really creating a space where maybe young people will come in and use these studios and suites, other nonprofits, and they'll begin to maybe build their church back up again. And they still own the church. And it's a cash flowing concern. In fact, there's enough cash flow here projected conservatively that they could pay their pastor, because they couldn't even pay their pastor, right, Bernice? They couldn't even pay the pastor. So now they're going to be able to pay the pastor.
Yeah, and I just to chime in, the First Presbyterian Church of Lafayette, Louisiana, is similar to a lot of churches in Buffalo, and unfortunately, the Catholic Church is sort of they're debating how they're going to sell or whatever, and they have their own rules, but it doesn't negate the principle and the ideas, right? Our Lady of Perpetual Help, St. John Canty, all of these, they have these great spaces that they're sitting Bernards that they're all these great spaces sitting there that could be rented, that could be driving in money to pay for insurance costs, which are going up. And imagine you not having to do as many bingo nights, right, or cupcake or drives or spaghetti dinners, right? This is because that's how they, Monty, this, but that's how so many of these churches are staying alive. It's spaghetti dinners and and parties and fundraisers, but you can do that, but you could also use your spaces to drive in some funds. And it's every single church I've been to, St. Casimir, again, ton of really great space, just sitting there, not being used at all. And they're heated, right? We're paying for heat, we're paying for electric already. It's like, why not use these spaces? And First Pres in Lafayette, Louisiana, I mean, this is for them to be able to go get $500,000 in funding to do this work. And they don't, that's for upgrades. And that's they'll pay the loan, they'll pay their pastor, they're paying their staff, they're going to make money every year. This is like a big thing. And they had to convince their whole board, all of the folks, but it actually wasn't that hard because they were similar to where a lot of our churches are in Western New York. They're sort of at low point, right, where they don't know what to do, and but they have these big bills in front of them, and so they really they're like, okay, let's go. And they've been really, really, really fun and good to work with.
Yeah, and Bernice, another point here is like, here's where you have to have the discipline. You have to have self-restraint. So if you got to take what you got and reuse it. This was $500,000 to remodel this. Okay, that's not very much money these days. And so you've got to be able to use the spaces as they already are, pretty much. I mean, to a certain extent. If you start, the first thoughts they had here, you remember, Bernice, they were going to put residential in these wings.
Mm-hmm.
But putting residential in we're talking about a couple of $1 million to convert this from the commercial to residential. But to convert it from a music room or a Bible study room to a studio was nothing. I mean, they still
paint and a lock.
Paint, paint and a good lock and some flooring and the bathrooms. We're not even remodeling the bathrooms. Well, we're remodeling them, but we're not redoing them where they're making them ADA accessible and all of that, because since we're only doing cosmetic work, we don't have to meet the ADA, the Americans for Disabilities Act. So you got to have restraint when you do this. You got to start with the end in mind, just like we just showed you. You got to run the numbers, get your as-built floor plan, run the numbers, get some help on what you can get income, get some help on what generally it may cost to remodel it. See if those numbers work. See if you're in the ballpark before you get started.
Absolutely.
Next,
all right. Now you're Elmwood Methodist Church.
This is a really interesting one that I'm in the midst of right now. It's Elmwood Methodist Church in Dallas, Texas, and this is going to be a private nonprofit partnership. This is the same old story. You got, this is an area that's mostly Hispanic. Used to be mostly white. Now it's mostly Hispanic, and so you got really old white people and a few young Hispanic people barely holding this church together. And the bottom part of this, it's in a very pretty good urban neighborhood, a really popular neighborhood. And these days it's actually gentrifying a little bit and getting better. But the back building is a gymnasium. and some fellowship rooms. And the front building is the sanctuary. Go to the next slide, and you can see what it looks like. There's the street frontage, the sanctuary and a fellowship room, the two peaked areas. That's what it has. And then you got all the other rooms in between. Next slide. And there's the gymnasium. And so here's the problem. You can just leave it right here for a second. So when I met the folks here that ran this, that are running this church, and women, they were all women too. There was no men here helping. Men had abandoned this, and a woman pastor. The air conditioning's gone out. That's $500,000. Roofs were needed to be replaced. That's another $400,000. Asbestos throughout the building. They couldn't hardly do anything. They had to remove asbestos. Landscaping's overgrown. They're limited on parking. They were getting ready to sell this building, to sell it and merge with another church. When they sell this building, the money's gone. It just goes in, nobody gets the money, right? It has to go back into a nonprofit. They were going to merge with this other church, different culturally. It was an African-American church. It was probably too many mix. I don't know, in churches, sometimes things don't mix as well. They were very hesitant, thinking, they wanted to keep their own church in their own neighborhood, and they really wanted to figure out how to do that. And in fact, I'd been working with the African American church too about how to do the same thing, both churches, and I knew them well. And so what I decided here was to come up with a plan that the church here doesn't owe any money on the property. And me, as a private developer, community developer, I proposed a new LLC, a partnership here, a for-profit, nonprofit partnership, where what they would do is they would put the church into the partnership as collateral, paid for collateral. And then I would go to the bank and borrow the $2.5 million, and personally guarantee that, personally sign as a developer like me or like Bernice has to do, personally sign this note and get the money to fix this thing back up and do the same thing we're talking about in Duncanville and in Lafayette. And in this case here, there's several problems. We began to deal with those problems. In this case here, they already had people renting some of the rooms and wanting some of these spaces. And but they couldn't use them because they couldn't afford to get the air conditioning. So they're meeting in the gymnasium right now because they couldn't afford to get anything going. Some of the problems, we had to talk to what they call in the Methodists have the national conference. They had to talk to, they own the property, the local group does, but they had to talk to the national conference. We had to make sure that they didn't lose their nonprofit status. As an organization, they could still take donations. Now, this is going back on the tax rolls. In Texas, churches don't pay any real estate taxes. Churches don't. And so in this case here, once you start making a profit, or it starts to be part of a profit-making venture, then you got to pay real estate taxes, which is kind of a good thing because it's back on the tax rolls now. And so again, next, we began to run the numbers. Next slide. So in this case here, we had about a 41,000 square foot building total. And then what we figured is half the building, see, we didn't even have any as-built plans yet. We just knew some totals. Half the building is these event spaces or sanctuaries. And then we knew what we could rent them out for. We estimated that we could rent them, a couple of times a week, and then we would also rent some of the smaller spaces for 800, it's like a big event space, right? You're renting space all the time, like an event space, and you got events going on, and then you got studios going, and we figured we could get a total income of about 500,000 annually gross income. And then we had this amount of work to do over here, this cost to renovate, air conditioning, a roof, asbestos, other remodel, landscaping, contingency. Now this 1.4 went up to like 2 million, $2 million. But in the beginning, where we're at right now, we're like seeing if we're in the ballpark. We got some ideas. Again, we haven't even spent any money on architecture or anything. We're just going off of square footages. Next. And so in this case here, we have the assumptions that we've made. We have the cost of renovating the property. We have the income, and then we have the grand total of both buildings of all the income and expenses. Go ahead to the next slide. And this ends up being with this building ends up with the total expenses and after debt service and everything is done, end up with about $60,000 in cash flow, and that includes paying everybody that's doing all this work. So here's what the church gets in the end. The church gets 50% of something rather than 100% of nothing. And by making this relevant and by reaching out and using God's resources, okay, to 7 days a week or more than just the 1 or 2 days a week, the church is going to be able to begin to grow again and be attracting young people. And it's got to do nothing but good. In fact, I know of another temple. I know of a Buddhist temple here in Dallas that started a restaurant, a vegan restaurant. And you go into this church and you go, it's the weirdest thing. You turn left and you go into the chapel. There's these Buddhist statues and all this stuff over here. And you turn right and go into one of the best vegan restaurants in the whole city. Hugely popular. Wow. And it's just amazing how they're mixing these uses. And so there's your 3 examples, Bernice. And, we could talk 100 different ways and we could get way more into detail. If any of you out there want to talk some more offline, or you want to look at your floor plans and kind of dream and project, and we can do that with your properties.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monte. And actually, what you just said goes right into my realm, and to lead this, which is, the pastor Matt at Trinity on Delaware. He said something like this. He says I say it better, but basically the church is used to taking care of the community, right? And giving out, doing things for the community. But I believe that the next wave of church is letting the community take care of you, right? And so when the church, if you can operate your church and you can do your religious related things, but all of a sudden your building is an asset to the community. You're renting out space affordably, maybe building on the parking lot, and phase down the road. Your space becomes this ongoing, kind of beautiful synergy for the community, by the community, with the community, right? And so I think, as Matt says at Trinity, which is in this photo here that I put in there, and I didn't plan this, but he says all the time, you got to let the community take care of you. And I think that that's something that the churches, everyone that runs churches, they're so used to taking care of the people in the community and doing that, but also let them take care of you at the same time. So, there's questions that for Monte. I think there's a few questions in the Q&A. We'll have time. I'm going to do like 10 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. So let me tell you a few things about what you can do with your church on next steps as you're thinking your church is vacant, or you're struggling, or whatever the case may be. Here are a few tools that should be in your toolbox for saving and getting your church to come back to life. So in the city of Buffalo, in the city of Niagara Falls, some other cities around Western New York as well, if you are a certified local government, you have a preservation law, you have a preservation board. And so locally landmarking your churches, like Trinity on Delaware and Buffalo is, and if you can locally landmark your church, which Preservation Buffalo Niagara is doing, we have like 10 applications in the queue right now, and we're working as fast as we can to get these done with volunteer help, with our staff help. It's been a lot. But if you can locally landmark your church, it actually does all the research that you need. It sets the stage for more funding available. Whether you're a church or you're a developer, or anything in between, that research, the local landmark status, and the research that's needed for a local landmark is huge for you. Okay, so becoming a local landmark is a great next step. If you're again, Buffalo has local landmark, Niagara Falls has local landmarks. Some other municipalities don't have local landmarking. So if you don't have local landmarking, you got to call Preservation Buffalo Niagara. We'll help you figure that out. But for right now, local landmark. And then the next thing you want to think about, whether again, developer or a church, just going to church, managing a church, is can you get your church on the National Register of Historic Places? Now, the photo in this, I have to, it's like a shameless plug, is 198 Emsley Sacred Heart Church. I asked the world, the universe, the gods, all the things to save this church personally at least 10 years ago when it was vacant, wide open, people were. And what happened? It was vacated was vacant. And then it just became purchased by a great family who's restoring this now. And Preservation Buffalo Niagara is actually providing substantial money for all the masonry work happening. So this photo I just took because we're doing this work with them as a nonprofit providing funding for stabilization. The point of what I want to say is the owners basically got this on the National Register of Historic Places, which opens up the door to the tax credits. So, so if you're a developer or want to be a developer, you want to buy a church, the tax credits are huge. I mean, it's 40%, sometimes 50%, depending on how spend that can be basically paid of your project. I mean, it's huge numbers, especially, so in the case of 198 Emsley, this would never work without the historic tax credits. So when you're doing your local landmark application, you're actually setting the stage for the National Register because you have to do all that research. And what you can do is you can what we call a determination of eligibility. You can actually take all that research and send it to the State Historic Preservation Office and say, hey, hi, like, look at my church. Do you think it could be on the National Register? And they will actually say yes or no and open the door. It's like a key that opens the door to, if you get a yes, okay, now you can really push forward to get the historic tax credits and get on the National Register. So I say it out loud because it's important, but getting that determination of eligibility is a huge step. Of course, how do you do that? You have to do the research. Well, if you're doing the research, you should locally landmark your building if you can, right? It's all these are tools available to you. Now, the other thing everybody asks for is money, grant funding. Well, guess what? Through the National Trust, there is a National Fund for Sacred Spaces, a fund that is available on an annual basis. But the key is that you have to have typically National Register status. So you have to be historic, which is my previous slide. Sometimes they'll allow you to be a local land only. So there's funding available through the National Fund for Sacred Spaces, which is the National Trust, the historic tax credits, as I mentioned, traditional banking, as Monte just mentioned. So you can get bank loans for renovation if you do the work. And I also wanted to say foundations at times maybe can fund some of this work for you. And so it's hard right now, actually. It's even the National Fund for Sacred Spaces through the National Trust, that fund, it's not even available today. It's available typically in the beginning, like January, February every year. And for the local people on the call, and there's a lot, a great example, Corpus Christi has taken advantage. UU Church on Elmwood has gotten funding through the national, through the Sacred Places funding. They're there. And so I wanted to put this slide as very broad. What we're going to do at Preservation Buffalo Niagara is update our website as funding comes in, funding opportunities. So that way, tax credits, grant funding, etc. We will try our best to be up to date on all of those funds. So if you're looking for funding for your project, you can trust PBN to guide you. That's our role as a nonprofit, is to help you. So I will say loosely, there's funding out there, but you can't get this funding until you do your homework and your research. You get locally landmarked, you get your determination of eligibility to be on the National Register, you get your National Register status. All of those things really matter. That's how these funding streams work. There are other funds that are available, but it's just they're unreliable to say them in sort of a educational webinar. If we do see emergency funding come up or things of that nature, I will be the first to put it out on our Facebook page and our Instagram, and our website and things of that nature.
Bernice, I wanted to add something. What Bernice is talking about is becoming attractive to money. what she said was, by getting all these things in order, getting your plan right, getting a realistic plan, not a pie in the sky plan, a plan that's really sound, you're going to become attractive to money. And in my
Right.
presentation, I used all, conventional, financing. And Bernice is talking about all the other avenues. If you can get some conventional financing, then you got all these grants and these other things. You're going to have a project that's viable, and you got a realistic plan. So you want
Yes.
to become attractive to money. Get your financials in order. Get your paperwork in order. Get your plan realistic. Don't be just dreaming. And I mean, we like to dream. Okay, we both like to dream. Bernice and I do, but we also are realists. We're very much realists because we've been kicked around with financing so much. So we want to.
Yeah.
The most important thing we like to say is making money, or I do. Bernice says it opposite of me. Making money and doing good is equal. Bernice says doing good is the most important thing, and making money is equal. So we're, that's the different parts of the country. Right.
Yeah, and just a couple more points, and Monty is right. It's becoming a trend, and this actually leads into my next one is, if you are within a community, there's Preservation Buffalo is a nonprofit that takes on preservation initiatives, but in Jamestown and Wilson, there's all these historic preservation coalitions and groups. You can maybe say, what can I do, right? And so here's an example. Back to Sacred Heart Church, Preservation Buffalo Niagara several years ago advocated for funds heavily through the state, anyone we could talk to at the time. And we were awarded funding to do the stabilization. We don't have to be the only one that does things this, right? And so if you're a preservation organization or even a block club, an association, or people, think about, okay, I'm not just with my church. Maybe I can convince, organizations like PBN or neighborhood block clubs or the First Ward Community Center or whoever, to help, what programs can they come up with to help augment the church situation, right? And amplify. So in this case, bringing money to 198 Emsley is huge. And guess what happened? They're attractive to more money, they're doing the right thing. And they just got county funds. So it's exactly like what Monty said, you make yourself attractive and you work through, but don't be shy to partner with people and organizations to work together. Trinity, for example, they asked me if I want to be on their building committee. I said, absolutely. I'd love to be on your building committee. When do they like how often, and they're like, oh, every like 1 to 2 months. Okay, I can do that. No problem. I would love to do that. And there are plenty of other organizations. There's contractors and architects out there that would love to be on Reimagine Our Church board, and help out, because we all are here because we love Buffalo, we love Western New York. Just a couple more things, which this is a really interesting thing, my zoning board hat for a second. I don't know if people realize this, but I wanted to say this in this talk while we're educating and inspiring. If you're in the city of Buffalo, there's actually 2 amazing things in our zoning code that have changed recently as of 2016 that can help churches. One, if you get an adaptive reuse permit, you can basically do anything you want within a church. There's few rules, you got to go look it up. You can't beer brewery tanks on the outside. You have to keep it within the space. But if you're thinking about when you say, well, can I have offices? Can I have a dance studio? Can I do all these things? Yes, you can, with an adaptive reuse permit. And the SIG zoning code allows you to do that. It was not like that before. It wasn't. And then the second thing that has been a huge preservation initiative that I helped, advocate for is removing parking requirements. So if you want to store your church or add space or a dance studio, you don't have to have parking there. And I don't want to get into zoning too much, but it used to be required that you did. So for example, if you had a dance studio, it'd probably require 100 spaces. Well, what if your church only has 20 spaces? Well, now you can't do a dance studio. Nope, there's no rules on parking in Buffalo anymore. And if you're a municipality around, not in Buffalo, but around, and you want to help churches, changing your zoning with these 2 things would be huge. It'd be huge for the churches in Wilson and in Jamestown and Amherst. All these things matter. So remove your parking minimums and get your adaptive reuse permit so you can do creative things. And then the last thing, and I would have been, if I didn't say this, I think it wouldn't have been fair. But I think that if you're thinking of starting from the very beginning and working with what you have, this is way out in the universe for you right now. Okay. This is like phase 10. But we have seen where churches do infill. And this is a picture that I took in South Bend just recently, where a church is taking on infill working. They're doing new housing on the land that they already own. And the reason why it can be profitable is because you have the land. So a lot of these churches have campuses, they have vacant lots, they have parking lots where they can build on and do affordable housing, infill housing, et cetera, within the campus. And of course, this is phase 10. Please don't say, oh, we're building houses tomorrow. No, but obviously start with in the beginning, start slower. But this is where you could get up to, you could build to and provide some housing for the neighborhood or do a new building. You have a lot of space, as Monte knows, that you basically have for free, right? You have the land for free, so it can actually drive down the cost of construction overall. So I don't want to get you excited about it too much, but I do want to say that it is possible.
And this happens.
So I won't.
This happens with schools too. Schools have those big sites. They have a school. We're working on one. Bernice and I are working on one in Kansas City, Missouri, that have a school in the middle on a big site where they put affordable housing around a resource center, an entrepreneurial center in the old school.
Yeah. So I wanted to end with do what you can with what you have where you are, because it's important. And then I'm going to answer questions. I got a couple of questions that came in, so that I want to answer, and Monte answered them too as well. But I want to make sure that I say, we'll keep our resources at preservationbuffaloniagara.org. We actually have a tab specifically Save Our Sacred Sites that has tax credit information, local landmark information. We will funnel as much as we can to that. We're a small nonprofit, so if we miss something, just send us an email, or shoot me an email. My email's on here, bernice@pbnsaves.org, and we will do our best to kind of get it up there. But now I want to answer a couple questions that came in. We have a few more minutes, which is good. I can't believe we did this in less than an hour, Monty. I'm actually excited. Ann James said, it seems like what we need is a creative, open-minded developer. Where do we find them? And who actually has a track record that the banks will respect. Monty, I know you responded, but do you want to talk briefly?
About the small scale, about Ann?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, here's the thing about what we talk about in Bernice and I at Neighborhood Evolution. Part of our philosophy is that the locals can do this work. The big developer from out of town is not going to come and do something really, generally speaking, not going to come and do something for your community. Not always. I don't want to create an absolute statement, but these are going to be local people who care. And if they need, local smaller developers like Bernice and I, well, we need two things. We need equity, which the property could serve as your equity. Okay, the property could be your equity, and we need decent financing. And if you have some of these grants and other things that can go with it, or tax credits, then you've got a deal that can be done. And do you need a creative developer? Yeah, you do, but you really need a common sense developer, somebody that can really come in and look at this thing and use it for what it is, and kind of use it for what it is. And these are basic principles of finance that we're talking about. We're not talking about any really tricks. You get as much equity as you can, whether it be from grants or investors or yourself, and you get a bank loan, and you have a property that makes enough money to cash flow. End of story. Whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, you still need cash flow. Just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't need cash flow. And so that's really the people are around you already, and generally they're architects and realtors and small developers and home builders, those kind of people. And you want to cultivate those people in your community. And you guys already have a strong community, from what I know about Bernice's community anyway. You already have a really strong community of people who really care about their neighborhoods.
And I'll say we can help, and also you could be, you need a developer to maybe do some of this, but we've seen churches take on this role and run with it. So, I have not met more dedicated people in my life than people that are dedicated to their church, right? So if you are sitting there going to church every week, wondering how to pay this, I mean, it could easily be you, that's doing this work. And we can help. I can make you a leasing sign in an hour, like, so I mean, you just let me know what you need, so it's like, but it's, we can help. I could help you run the numbers. Monty and I can help you run the numbers, like all that stuff that you're uncomfortable with, but leading the charge and putting the signs and getting it ready and paint and getting the rooms ready, you already know, you've done this. I mean, I went to Our Lady Perpetual Help. I keep talking about them because they're just so dedicated. They renovated all those spaces on their own for the most part. So we're not foreign to the of working and renovating spaces at these churches. I mean, and one other question from Annette. It says, oh yeah, so I can answer this. So Annette asks about the Catholic Church restrictions, and can I elaborate? Yes, I can elaborate, and then we'll wrap this up. The restrictions are not great at all. I believe it's our job to put pressure on the municipalities, so City of Buffalo, City of Niagara Falls, to put pressure on the Catholic Diocese to reduce or remove the restrictions. I think it's our job. PBN, we're taking that lead. We're actually working on a guide, a strategy guide. It's in my hands right now. I don't know if you can see it, but it's floppy and edited and written all over. But we're trying to empower municipalities to ask the Catholic Diocese to reduce some of the restrictions. I'll tell you, you can't do horoscopes, you can't do fortune telling, you can't do women's health services, you can't do restaurants right now. Like there's a lot of, but I did hear from the real estate agent from the Catholic Diocese, and they said, this is a bankruptcy thing. They're not totally 100% on all these restrictions. They'll be willing to work with people. We just have to have you have to have those conversations with them. So I'm actually hopeful that maybe we can convince the municipalities to put a little pressure, because why would we think about it? Buffalo, Amherst, Wilson, Jamestown, all these people, Niagara Falls, to demolish a church, it's over $1 million. I have seen my own eyes quotes for over $1 million for some Buffalo related churches. The city of Buffalo cannot absorb $16 million worth of demolition potential costs, right? It's in city of Buffalo's best interest to say, hey, let's rethink, let's think positively about their future, not demolition, because we can't afford it. We can't pay. I mean, that's payers pay it. So I would say overall, keep the pressure on the Catholic Diocese, on your political, people that to get the Catholic Diocese to reduce those restrictions if possible and to be more flexible. And if we can do that, then we may have some churches where we can, I don't know, maybe we do have restaurant opportunities. Maybe we can do a dance studio, and things of that nature. So actually there are restrictions, but it doesn't say like no rock gym or no accounting offices or or studio space. It doesn't say that. You can do a lot even within those restrictions. So I really encourage you to everybody that's on the call, there's several people that are on this call, reach out to me if you have questions. We are happy to help at Preservation Buffalo. Monty and I, as said, we do this work, like not just in Buffalo, we're around to help. But the most important thing I wanted to do is have this to inspire you that we can do this and we should do this, and we can't give up on these architectural gems. Their communities, they deserve to to serve the community for the next 50 to 100 years, and it's up to us. It's like we must act now. So I thank you all for coming. I will record that. This is recorded. I will save it, and I will make sure it's uploaded, and I will send an email with the link. And I thank you. I guess, Monty, anything last words?
Nope, nothing else. I think, Liz, you're right about what you said on your, there's a lot of other ways to monetize. Just be creative. Think about all the ways that you can earn an income on these. And remember this, the only thing we take with us from this life is what we give away. And so your time and your energy into these great structures and stuff and rebuilding your communities and making your towns better is really important. And I appreciate each of you that are doing that for your communities. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Monty, for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Bernice, for asking.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.